Get ready to dim the lights and lock your doors. Friday Night Frights is here to haunt your weekend. Every Friday night, we bring you spine-chilling tales of the macabre, the mysterious, and the downright terrifying. From cursed artifacts to shadowy creatures lurking in the dark, these stories will keep you on the edge of your seat long after the episode ends. Are you brave enough to listen? Tune in and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more eerie episodes. It is very windy here tonight, so you might hear a little bit of that in the recording, but hopefully it won't distract from the story. I have a really good story for you tonight, and I gotta tell you, this is a scary one. I asked my grandson, Jasper, to come up with the scariest ghost story that he could. And I gotta say, he did a bang-up job. This is a very scary story. So, I hope you'll enjoy it, and let Jasper know how he did in the comments below. I think that we've got a budding Stephen King here. This is called The Voice That Lied by Jasper Janssen-Trull. The first time I saw him, I was 5 years old. It was late, past the time I was supposed to be asleep, but I couldn't close my eyes. The shadows in my room always seemed darker at night. My little race car nightlight did its best, but it could never chase away all the dark corners. And that's where I saw him. He stood near my closet, half hidden in the shadows, a boy, pale and thin, with skin like paper and hair the color of ash. His eyes were cloudy, like a fogged-up window. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. At first, I thought he might be a dream. Maybe I wasn't really awake, but I could hear the hum of the old fan in the corner, feel the scratch of my blankets against my legs. It wasn't a dream. I hid beneath the covers and waited for morning. The next day, I told my mom about him. She smiled the way moms do when they think you're being silly. "You've got a big imagination, Jakey," she said, ruffling my hair. Maybe it was just a shadow. But it wasn't. I saw him again the next night, and the night after that, always standing, always watching. He never spoke, never moved, just stood there with that empty gaze. When I told my dad, he laughed. "You've been watching too many spooky cartoons," he said. "There's no such thing as ghosts." But the boy was real, and I was the only one who saw him. By the time I was 7, the boy wasn't just standing in the shadows anymore. I'd see him in places he shouldn't be, reflected in the glass of the living room window, standing at the edge of the playground at school, watching from the corner of my room, even in broad daylight. He never spoke, but I could feel him, like the way you know someone's staring at you, even when you can't see them. The air would grow heavy, the silence deeper. I'd look over my shoulder, and there he'd be. Then the tapping started. It was soft at first, a rhythmic tap, tap, tap against the walls. I'd lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to stop. Sometimes it would last for minutes, sometimes hours. My parents never heard it. No matter how loud I thought it was, the sound seemed to belong to me alone. I tried covering my ears, but the tapping always found a way in. The whispers came next. Not words, not really. Just sounds. A low, dry rasp that slithered through the dark. I'd squeeze my eyes shut, tell myself it wasn't real, but I could feel the boy watching. The whispers were his. I knew it. I told my mom again. I begged her to listen. "There's a boy," I said, tears burning my eyes. "He won't leave me alone." She crouched down and held my face in her hands. "Sweetheart, you're safe. There's no boy, I promise." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But when I went to bed that night, I saw him standing at the foot of my bed, and he was smiling. By the time I turned 9, I learned not to talk about the boy. It only made things worse. My dad would get angry, saying I was too old for imaginary friends. My mom tried to be gentle, but I saw the worry in her eyes. I hated that look. It made me feel like I was the problem. But I wasn't. The boy was. He had changed. His pale skin grew grayer, like something left too long in the dark. The cloudy eyes were emptier now, as if whatever was inside him was slowly rotting away. And no matter where I went, he was there. I saw him in the corner of my room, his head tilting ever so slightly when I tried to ignore him. I caught glimpses of him in reflections, the bathroom mirror, the darkened window of the car. Every time I blinked, he was gone. But I knew he'd be back. The whispers grew louder. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was different, cruel. The boy didn't just watch anymore. He wanted something. I could feel it. At school, I stopped playing with the other kids. Every time I looked toward the trees lining the playground, he was there, peeking through the branches. No one else noticed. No one ever noticed. At night, I stayed awake for as long as I could. Sleep was when he was strongest. Sometimes I'd see him crouching in the corner, his twisted grin faintly visible in the dark. Other times I'd hear him, the soft patter of bare feet on my floor. One night I woke to find him standing beside my bed. His face was just inches from mine. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The boy never touched me, but he didn't have to. I was already his. I was 11 when the boy grew into something that wasn't just a ghost. He was something worse. His face had twisted into something barely human. His grin was too wide, stretching across his pale face like cracked porcelain. The empty eyes weren't just empty. They were hungry. Watching me wasn't enough for him anymore. I could feel it. He wanted more. Just like how the taps became whispers, and the whispers became words, jagged, broken phrases that crawled into my ears. You can't hide. They're afraid of you. They know what you are. I tried to shut him out, pressing my hands against my ears, but the voice was inside me now. I could hear him even when he wasn't there. My parents grew more concerned. My mom would sit with me at night, stroking my hair as I stared at the ceiling. "It's just nightmares," she whispered. "We'll get you help." But the boy didn't care. He stood at the foot of the bed, grinning, while she tried to soothe me. She never saw him. Dad stopped being patient. "Enough!" he snapped one morning after I told him the boy had been in my room again. "There's nothing there, Jacob. You're too old for this." But I wasn't making it up. The boy proved that to me the following night. I woke to the sound of scratching, not at the window, not on the walls, from beneath my bed. Slow, deliberate, nails dragging against the wooden floor. "Come closer." The whisper coiled around me. My chest tightened. I didn't move, couldn't breathe. The scratching stopped, and then the mattress shifted. The boy's pale, lifeless hand crept out from beneath the bed frame, his fingers curling around the edge. I saw his face next, upside down, twisted and smiling. Soon, he said. I screamed. My parents rushed in, but by then the boy was gone. This time, Mom didn't try to soothe me. She held me as I sobbed. Dad stood in the doorway, his face grim. They spoke about doctors the next morning. A psychiatrist, they said. But no doctor could help me, because the boy was real, and I knew he wasn't done with me yet. By the time I turned the ripe age of 12, the boy wasn't just a shadow in the corner. He was a constant. I saw him everywhere. At school, he'd stand just beyond the playground fence, his pale face barely visible through the rusted links. In the car, I'd catch him in the side mirror, smiling from the edge of the road. At dinner, I'd glance up and see him reflected in the darkened window, though there was nothing but empty night outside. I stopped telling my parents. What was the point? They'd already decided I was making it up. My dad grew cold. My mom just looked tired. Every time I opened my mouth to speak, I saw the fear flicker behind her eyes. Not fear of the boy, fear of me. But they didn't see what I saw. The boy had changed again. His face was sharper now, stretched too thin, like something hollow. His grin never faded. The whispers that once coiled softly through the dark were louder now, bitter, cruel. They don't believe you, but they will. I didn't know what he meant, but I felt it, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Sleep became impossible. I kept my bedside lamp on every night, but the light didn't stop him. Nothing did. I'd wake up to find him standing in my doorway, his head tilted unnaturally. The shadows twisted around him. Soon. That was all he said, over and over. Soon. The worst part wasn't the fear. It was the knowing that whatever the boy wanted, it was getting closer. I could feel it, like a storm on the horizon, and I wasn't sure if I would survive it. It happened on my 13th birthday, but I barely remember any of it. The day was a strange blur, like I was watching everything from behind glass. My parents tried to make it normal. Presents, cake, my sister singing happy birthday with too much enthusiasm. But something felt wrong. The cake was too sweet, the laughter too hollow, and no matter how much I smiled, the feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. The boy had been with me all day, too. He was always there, at the edge of my vision, in the reflection of the glass, behind the curtains, in the corners of the room. I would catch glimpses of him, just a flash of pale skin and dark eyes, and my heart would race. But I couldn't tell anyone. They wouldn't understand. By the time night came, the house fell into a quiet that felt almost oppressive. The voices of my parents and sister drifted down the hall as they went to bed. I stayed in my room, trying to avoid the inevitable. The longer I stayed awake, the more I could feel him growing closer, his presence looming in the air around me. I tried to distract myself, picking up a book, but the words didn't make sense. My eyes kept darting around the room. The shadows stretched unnaturally, and I could feel the weight of his gaze. Jacob. The whisper wasn't loud, but it crawled into my ears like cold fingers brushing against my skin. My breath caught. I jerked my head toward the window, and there he was, standing just outside, his pale face framed by the glass. Jacob, he repeated, voice slow and deliberate. I scrambled back against the headboard, my heart hammering in my chest. The boy didn't move. He never did. He just stood there, watching me, his eyes wide and empty. His smile, though, was different. It was crooked now, like something was wrong with him, like he was barely holding his form together. The whispers came faster, more insistent. You can't run. You can't hide. You're mine. I pressed my hands against my ears, trying to drown him out. It didn't help. The voice didn't come from outside. It came from inside my head. Suddenly the room felt too small, too tight. I couldn't breathe. My fingers trembled, and I reached for the pocket knife on the desk without thinking. The cold metal was a comfort, but it didn't make me feel safer. It felt like a tether, like I wasn't in control of my own body anymore. I stood up, still shaking, and slowly walked toward the door, the whispers guiding my every step. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to hurt anyone. But I knew deep down that I was already too far gone. The boy's grin grew wider as I crossed the threshold. "It's time," he said, his voice chilling. I stopped at the foot of my parents' bedroom door, my hand still clutching the knife. I could hear them talking softly inside, the sound muffled through the wood. I tried to turn back, to run, but the boy was there, standing just behind me. His face was so close now, so close that I could feel the coldness of his breath on my skin. His fingers brushed against my arm. "You're mine." Everything around me spun. My legs gave out, and I fell to the floor. My mind was a blur of confusion and fear. The boy's grin stretched wider, and I could feel the darkness creeping in. I closed my eyes. I had to escape. I had to wake up. But when I opened them again, I was back in my bed. The knife was gone. The boy was gone. I looked around, frantic, but everything was still. I finally felt safe. That was until I saw the figure standing over my bed. The boy, smiling even wider than usual, as he said one word, "Sleep." And then everything went black. I woke up to the smell of blood. It was thick, metallic, clinging to the air like something rotten. My stomach twisted. For a moment I thought I was still dreaming, but the pounding in my chest and the cold sweat on my skin told me otherwise. The house was silent, too silent. No hum of the fridge, no creak of the old pipes, just the low, suffocating stillness that made the walls feel closer than they should. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. 4:03 a.m. I sat up, my hands trembling. The boy was gone. There was no sign of him, no whispers, no shadowy figure in the corner. But the feeling he left behind lingered. The wrongness, the dread, and the smell. I forced my feet to the floor, the boards groaning beneath my weight. My door was open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. As I stepped into the hallway, the darkness seemed thicker. The shadows moved with me, stretching across the walls. I didn't want to go further, but something pulled me forward. My heart pounded. Every step felt heavier than the last. Then I saw it. A smear of crimson on the floor. It trailed from the end of the hallway, glistening under the dim light of the moon filtering through the window. Drops of blood, dark, thick, fresh. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. My body moved on its own, desperate for the one thing that could make this nightmare end. Mom, Dad. They would know what to do. They would make it all okay. I stumbled down the hall, following the twisted trail. My parents' door was slightly ajar, the shadows inside swallowing the light. The smell was stronger now, almost unbearable. My hand shook as I reached for the handle, pushing it open. The room was cold. My eyes adjusted slowly, the scene unraveling before me. There was blood, so much blood. It stained the sheets, the walls, the floor. My mother lay on her side, still tucked beneath the covers. Her eyes were open, wide with a terror I couldn't understand. Her mouth was slightly parted, as if she had tried to scream, but no sound had come. Beside her, my father's body was slumped over, one arm dangling off the bed. His pajama shirt was soaked through, the dark fabric clinging to the gaping wound that had stolen him away. His face was pale, his eyes closed, lifeless. A strangled cry escaped my lips. I stumbled backward, my chest heaving. No! 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 This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I turned and ran. The hallway spun around me, the shadows twisting, my hands pressing against the walls to keep from falling. Lily. I had to find Lily. She would be scared. She would need me. Her door was closed. I could still see the stickers she had plastered on it, glittery stars, cartoon animals, her name written in shaky crayon letters. I hesitated, my hand hovering above the doorknob, but I had to see. I pushed the door open. The moonlight spilled across her small bed, illuminating her pale face. She was lying down, clutching her stuffed bear, the one she named Buttons. Her tiny fingers were curled around its worn, patched-up body, her long brown hair fanned out over the pillow. Her eyes were closed, peaceful, unmoving, a knife sprouting from her chest with red stain blooming around it. My legs gave out. I collapsed to the floor, the sobs racking through me. Lily! She didn't answer. She couldn't. Buttons lay beside her, its fur stained crimson, and somewhere in the darkness of the house I swore I could hear the boy laughing. My hands were stained red. The blood was thick, smeared across my fingers and caked beneath my nails. I didn't remember touching anything. I didn't remember anything at all. My chest heaved and I stumbled back, my legs barely able to hold me up. The walls of Lily's room spun, closing in around me. No, 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 no! I clutched my head, my fingers tangling in my hair as I gasped for breath. The air was too thick. My lungs burned. I tried to stop the sobs, but they tore through me. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. And then I saw him, the boy. He stood in the corner of the room, half hidden in the shadows, his pale face twisted into a grin, his black eyes gleaming. He was closer than ever now, so close I could see the sharpness of his teeth behind that awful smile. Blood stained his hands, dripping from his fingertips, but it wasn't his blood. You did this. The words slithered from his mouth, soft and cold. No, I choked, shaking my head violently. No, I didn't. But the boy only stepped closer. His smile never wavered. You did this, Jacob. He whispered it again and again and again. His voice was everywhere. It echoed through the walls, through my head, pounding with every frantic beat of my heart. I pressed my hands tighter against my ears, trying to drown him out. But I couldn't. You did this. You did this. You did this. Stop! I screamed, but the boy didn't stop. He loomed over me now, his empty eyes locked on mine. His voice grew louder, a twisted chant that clawed its way into my mind. You did this. It wasn't me, I sobbed, falling to my knees. I swear it wasn't me. But the boy shook his head, that horrible grin still plastered across his face. They know, Jacob. They're coming. I froze. For a moment the world went silent. Then I heard it. The wailing cry of sirens, the distant hum of engines. Flashes of red and blue painted the night through the window. The police. They were coming. They know what you did. My entire body shook as the sound grew louder. Tires screeched, voices shouted, but all I could hear was the boy. His laughter twisted through the air, low and mocking. You can't hide from this. It wasn't me, I screamed again, my voice cracking. Tears streamed down my face, but the boy didn't care. He only stared, his black eyes burning into me. I could hear footsteps now, doors slamming, the sound of officers shouting orders. You did this, Jacob. The boy's voice was the last thing I heard before the door burst open, but all I could do was scream. The door crashed open. Heavy footsteps pounded through the house, shaking the floor beneath me. Flashlights sliced through the darkness, beams of white bouncing off the blood-streaked walls. The shouts of officers echoed down the hallway, growing louder with every second. Clear the front! We've got movement! But I didn't move. I couldn't. I was still kneeling on the cold floor, Lily's small, lifeless body cradled in front of me. My tears dripped onto her face, her stuffed bear still clutched tightly in her little hands. The weight of the world crushed my chest. Every breath was a struggle. Then they reached me. The first officer froze in the doorway. His flashlight illuminated the horror before him, the blood, the body, and me. His eyes widened, and for a moment he said nothing. Then came the others, more shouts, more lights. The room was blinding. Get down, one of them barked, his voice sharp. Hands where we can see them. No, please, I sobbed, my voice cracking. It wasn't me. I didn't do this. I tried to lift my hands, but they were trembling too much. The blood smeared across my skin, seemed to glow under the harsh light. My chest heaved, the walls spun, my ears rang with the echoes of the boy's laughter. But when I looked up, he was still there. The boy stood in the corner, grinning. His face was twisted in satisfaction, his hollow eyes gleaming. He didn't flinch at the officers. He didn't run. He only stared at me. Tell them, Jacob. His voice was a whisper now, barely audible. Tell them what you did. He's right there, I screamed, pointing with blood-stained hands. Don't you see him? He's right there. But they didn't look. Jacob, calm down. One officer stepped closer, his hand hovering near his holster. His expression twisted with a mixture of fear and pity. There's no one there. No, he's real, I sobbed, my voice breaking. He did this, not me. Please, you have to believe me. But they didn't. The boy smiled wider. The shadows curled around him like smoke. And then he was gone, just like that. No, I whispered. My body shook violently. No, no, no. He was here. You saw him. He was here. The officers didn't answer. They moved quickly, yanking me away from Lily's body. My arms were wrenched behind my back. The cold bite of metal snapped against my wrists. "It wasn't me!" I screamed again, thrashing against their hold. The cuffs dug into my skin, but I didn't care. "The ghost! He did this! He did this!" They ignored me. "We have a suspect in custody," one of the officers spoke into his radio, his voice emotionless. "Juvenile male, multiple casualties, requesting immediate transport." Tears blurred my vision. My knees buckled, and they dragged me from the room. I fought against them, my cries echoing through the empty house. "It wasn't me!" But no one listened, and the boy was gone. USA Today, writer John Everett. 13-year-old boy diagnosed with schizophrenia after family's murder. Claims ghost was responsible for deaths. Small town, USA. A devastating tragedy unfolded on the night of March 14th when 13-year-old Jacob Miller was arrested for the murder of his parents and younger sister. After a psychological evaluation, medical professionals have diagnosed Jacob with childhood-onset schizophrenia, a rare and severe mental illness. Police responded to a neighbor's 911 call, reporting screams from the Miller residence. Upon arrival, officers discovered Jacob in a state of distress, covered in blood and insisting that a ghost had killed his family. The victims, David Miller, 42, Margaret Miller, 39, and Lily Miller, 7, were found deceased in their bedrooms. Authorities have confirmed that there were no signs of forced entry and no evidence of an intruder. "It was a horrific scene," said Sheriff Michael Reynolds. "The level of violence is difficult to comprehend, especially considering the age of the suspect." Investigators quickly determined that Jacob acted alone, though the boy repeatedly claimed that a ghost, a pale boy with dark eyes, was responsible. According to reports, Jacob had experienced frequent hallucinations and delusions in the months leading up to the murders. His family had expressed concerns about his deteriorating mental state, though no formal treatment had been sought. "This diagnosis sheds light on the tragic nature of this case," said Dr. Elaine Porter, a leading child psychiatrist. "Schizophrenia can cause vivid auditory and visual hallucinations, leading those affected to perceive events that aren't real. Without proper treatment, individuals may act on these distorted beliefs." Childhood-onset schizophrenia is rare, with symptoms often emerging gradually. Professionals say Jacob's persistent belief in the ghost was a manifestation of his illness. Court records indicate he will be placed in a secure psychiatric facility for further evaluation and treatment. "It's heartbreaking," said family friend Clara Bennett. "They were a loving family, and Jacob was always such a quiet boy. It's hard to accept what's happened, but I hope he gets the help he needs." A vigil will be held in memory of the Miller family as the town mourns the devastating loss. Meanwhile, Jacob remains under psychiatric care, still insisting that the ghost was real. Okay, and there we go. That was quite a scary ghost story. And I've got to say that my grandson, who is an aspiring author, is nothing at all like Jacob. So we don't need to worry about that. But he did a very good job with writing a very scary story. So I hope that you all enjoyed it. And I hope we'll be hearing many more stories from Jasper in the future. And until next week, folks, have a great week. This is your host, Ginger Winters. Good night.
Hey folks, Clay Steele here. You know, I spend a lot of time outdoors around this here campfire. If you're like me, you get downright annoyed by all those pesky mosquitoes buzzing around. They're just looking for a free meal. Nothing ruins a good night under the stars faster than slapping and scratching at bites. And that's why I keep the bee itch stop. I keep it handy. One swipe and that itch is gone. No more burning, no more scratching, just good old relief. Made right here in Nevada with all natural ingredients. It's safe for the whole family. So if you're tired of being a mosquito buffet, do yourself a favor and get you some bee itch stop today. And this is Clay Steele. Watch out for them bugs.